Greetings, adventure. Welcome to the D20 Academy podcast. I'm Shiloh Kaneshiro.
And I'm Gabriel. And this week is World Building Culture, Part 2.
Hey guys, welcome to the second part of our culture for our world building series. We did part 1 last month, and now we're doing part 2. We got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Goodness, was that actually last month? Yes, so this week we're going to be talking about customs, art, education, gender roles, things like that.
Yeah, and there's all kind of stuff in there, like celebrations, fashion, architecture, food, all that good stuff. Hey, if you guys want to keep up with what we're doing here, want to ask us some questions, whatever it is, go ahead and follow us on Instagram at D20_Academy, or join our Discord, which you can just find by DMing us on Instagram. Also, I just started the YouTube channel for D20 Academy, where right now I'm trying to upload all the different podcast episodes that we've done in the past up to YouTube videos. So if you prefer listening to them on YouTube rather than like Spotify or whatever, you can now listen to them on YouTube. Also, I'm going to be doing tons of cool stuff on there. We're going to try to get some other cool like videos on that YouTube channel as well. So look out for all that.
Alright, first thing on the menu, customs. Customs is a big thing. It's been a while since we've talked about world building. Feels like it's been years. It's probably just been like a month or something.
Long time.
So we're going to start off with a biggie here. Customs. Customs play a big role in what defines a culture. It basically dictates like how they interact with other people, how they interact within themselves, how they just go about their everyday lives. So, when you're thinking about building a culture, thinking about the things that go into a culture, you're gonna want to think up some basic outline of some customs, you know? And it doesn't need to be like something big or super intense, but customs are important. And just like, for example, if you are like American, you probably have like some sort of custom of like, you know, how you greet someone, or you have like the way that you communicate with other people from other countries and things like that. You know, just like a basic outline of how you think that you should be doing that. It's built into you. It's just part of growing up in that culture.
Yeah. You know, like when you eat food, like when you eat meals, when you go to bed, well, all that kind of stuff, right? That's all tied into like the customs and all that kind of stuff. So like the one of the questions is like, what is the code of conduct between people of different ranks or classes, or is there even like ranks or classes in your society, in your culture that you're building in this world? I think we talked a bit last world building episode about like building your own like little cultures and like having class systems and such. But you know, if people within a culture, like, do they greet people differently if they are higher or lower class, or do they see them in a certain way, right? If we look back at medieval times, back when there was what's that form of government called? Like where they had like fiefdoms and stuff. Something. Anyway, there was like the vassals, and then they owned the land, and then there's like the land, the lords who had castles, and then the peasants worked the land in exchange for, protection or whatever. And so like there was definitely different classes, right? There was the peasant working class, there were like the merchants, and then there were like the nobles, and there was a different code of conduct, right? You have to treat the nobles with more respect. When someone of a higher class, if you're talking to someone of a lower class, you don't have to treat them with the same amount of respect, or whatever.
So it might be something like to reflect that in your world, where there's a strict code of conduct, might just a little bit even more gray. Like perhaps it's just like how they perceive the people of different classes, and just how they change their behavior around them unconsciously. Also, perhaps they have like customs, like how do the people in your world like convey like certain emotions and stuff. Do they outwardly convey like boredom or fear or excitement, or is they like conditioned to be more, just laid back? Are they conditioned to control their emotions more and not show them? Is it something like that, or are they perhaps they like exaggerate their emotions? They exaggerate their things, and like if they feel this, then they automatically like show it out and like throw it out there in the world. Like the difference
Right.
between like people's like there's like the stereotype of like, oh, Japanese people are always so like conservative and
Yes.
all that and that.
Quiet and strict and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Right.
And it's not
As
because
opposed to Americans.
yeah.
Americans who are kind of stereotypically or like much more louder, more expressive and
Brash.
such. Yes, exactly. So like the way they convey certain emotions and things is just different because of the culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? More Asian cultures, Chinese, Japanese, and stuff may be more like containing your emotions or whatever, or like American, where it's very you're very expressive, or other kind of European cultures where it's also a little different there. Yeah, so just like how do you know like if someone is bored or happy or sad? How are they conveying that? Obviously without saying I'm sad. But those just like cues. How is that ingrained into the culture?
Mm-hmm. Another thing to keep in mind is like this kind of factors into like during our language segment last time. We were talking about like are there like curse words in different languages that people use and
Right.
speaking in common. uh, for a culture, perhaps that they have a gesture that is universally insulting, or a gesture that is meant to like ward off evil or something like that in your culture.
Mm.
And there are certain gestures that can come into play in your story or in your role playing that can be like universally recognized. People like, in our world recognize the middle finger, but perhaps like in your world, like you have a warding gesture against evil, or a gesture meant as a curse. It's all sorts of
Yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
tidbits of flavor that you can throw in there to your culture.
I think something kind of inspiring that you can kind of draw from on the more like expressive kind of outrageous end is like pirate culture, and like that back in that time they just had all these superstitions, like I guess sailor culture,
Mm.
all these superstitions and like mythology, and they'd have little customs and gestures and things they would do. um, I just watched the Parts of the Caribbean trilogy like maybe a week or so ago, and they have all these little things that they pulled from the past to put in the movie, pulled from actual history, customs of sailors and pirates, of like when someone mentioned Davy Jones or whatever, then they do a little thing with their hands, and then they like spit on the floor, and then they like, or they do like the cross, where you bring your hand from your forehead to your chest to either shoulder, that thing as well, right? That kind of Catholic, Christian kind of symbol. If talk like, oh, save my soul or whatever it is. So that's kind of on the more colorful end of like lots of gestures and um, superstitions and things that they're kind of pulling on, that you can pull on, to inspire your own cultures and the customs of the cultures in your world.
Mm-hmm. You can also establish like holidays and celebrations within the culture, and that can add a lot of like flavor. Like in our own culture, we have certain celebrations like 4th of July and New Year's and Christmas and things like that that are just like universal throughout like our culture. Obviously, celebrations that happen every year. Perhaps your culture has things like that. Perhaps they have things that happen every 10 years, and so it's even more important and special. Just
Yeah.
when you're thinking like a history of a culture, as we've discussed in the past, perhaps there's some sort of thing like a war, or celebrating being created, something like that they celebrate every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think a great. I mean, once again, just look at real life. There's just so many examples and things that you can draw from, and things you can get inspired by, just from looking at examples, from real life. So, like, there are universal holidays and stuff, like Christmas, and New Year's. Um, And then there's more cultural specific holidays and celebrations, right? So for in America, Thanksgiving, nobody else has that. That's
Well, I mean, like Japan celebrates it. I think Canada has a different Thanksgiving.
Sure.
It's very weird.
It is
perhaps like Thanksgiving
specific.
isn't the best.
It is specific culturally to the United States. It's about when the people, the Pilgrims first came over, and all that kind of stuff, as well as Independence Day, right? When we became an independent nation. That's specific to the nation. That's specific to the culture. Though we do also celebrate the worldwide holidays as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, those are things to think about as well. I think Matt Mercer in Critical Role does this really well. It really helps immerse not only the players but the people watching Critical Role into the show. He has like the Midwinter's Crest Festival, which they had like a whole episode on in the first campaign, which was like a filler anime episode where they just like went around and did like carnival games. It was great, but he created a holiday specific to that region because of an event that happened in the past, much like our Thanksgiving or Independence Day. And then in the second campaign, which takes place in a different region of that world, they don't celebrate that because it has nothing to do with that culture of that region.
Yeah. So just, again, nice little things that you can throw in there. Perhaps an important thing in your world is perhaps in your culture there's like a rite of passage, a coming of age ceremony or celebration, like a bar mitzvah, quinceanera?
I forgot what the
Yeah.
quinceanera? Oh yeah, I want to say something like that. That's when a girl turns 16?
I think so, yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these can like be important celebrations in your culture that you're building. It's perhaps like a turning point in that person's life. Perhaps, that's like the start of their adventure for a character.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's something that, the players or the people that you're following in your story like come upon to add just like a bit more color to the cool shit that you're building.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can be like a central plot point or whatever, or it can be just kind of in the background, but, that is a cool thing to think about, like, what marks the transition from a child to an adult? When does that break happen in your culture? And that could be dependent on how, the race, if the culture is based around a race, like an elf or a dwarf or human, like how quickly they age. But like, if there's some kind of celebration, like what marks the separation from child to adult. I think what kind of like a common fantasy trope I'd say is like in a culture, like if it's like a young man, he has to like go out and like kill a bear or whatever, something like that. Like they have to go on like this hunt to prove their manhood. I feel like that kind of pops up a lot in fantasy worlds and stories. But yeah, I think that's something to think about. Also, something that we don't have on our notes here, but that I just thought of, is birthdays. Do you celebrate birthdays? And what is the perception of age?
Yeah.
Do people
are
think
you
and
like
talk about
normal
their age a lot?
people, or are you like South Koreans? Because love them, cool culture, but why do they do birthdays that way?
Yeah.
I probably don't. Sorry, ignore me. Useless ranting in the background.
But it's true to we do have different examples all over the world of different cultures and how they treat birthdays. But not just that, right? Just like age.
Mm-hmm.
Do people talk about age a lot?
Is age a
like
big
a thing?
in like how important you are, respected you are as a person?
Right.
Your perhaps
yeah.
your freedom and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Or is it like a little more like taboo to talk about? Just people don't want to think about their age and that they're getting old and dying or whatever. So like in the novel that I'm working on, that's in my world, it's kind of taboo to talk about your age. No one really like cares about how old they are or their birthday or whatever. Just because the culture of the world is it's very like capitalist, like power, like hungry, like try to just amass wealth and do whatever you can to get to the top and kill anyone ahead of you, kind of culture that's based on wealth and greed and everything. And people don't want to think about age because if you're poor, if you think about how old you're getting, it just makes you depressed because you have less and less years to climb the ladder and become wealthy. And if you're wealthy, you don't want to think about age because you don't want to think about how close you are to dying and losing all of your wealth because you want to keep it forever. So it's like it's kind of a social taboo in the culture of the world that I was building. But yeah, like Gabe was saying, maybe in like more of a tribal kind of culture, maybe like age matters a lot, and like the elders are the most respected, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of age, what happens when people die? Is there like a tradition around death and burial? Is it like a celebration? Is it more like a time of mourning? Is it where, in case of like a small culture, does like the whole culture like set time aside to celebrate and respect the elder who died? Or is it just like, oh, person died, move on?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, death and burial is really interesting. I mean, one thing is it could definitely be tied to the religion of your culture.
Mm-hmm.
What that religion has to say about death, or like if there's an afterlife, or all that kind of stuff. Most religions do. So it could be tied to that culture's religion, or just kind of based off the culture itself. But like for example, in America, the way we treat death and burials and funerals and stuff is much different than Eastern cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. In America, it's kind of a taboo thing. People don't really like talking about death and funerals and stuff. Whereas in other cultures around the world, it's people are much more open about that kind of thing. And we have like kind of two different ways. Like you get buried, or you like get cremated. But maybe in your culture, you can like pull from cultures like the ancient Egyptians who mummified important people.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the ancient Egyptians. Like, you should talking about like death customs. Wow.
Yeah.
They're like,
no, seriously.
Let's add some more here. This is a little bit too
like,
boring and simple.
Oh, the pharaoh died? Okay. I guess now we'll have to murder his wife and all his servants.
Cremate his cat with him.
Yeah. But it's so cool because, and then they're like, put you in a tomb and put a ton of treasure in there and some weapons and stuff, because in their culture, tied to their religion, when they die, he has to like, get judged, and then but all the stuff he's buried with, he's gonna have in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
So he's gonna have money if they bury money with him. He's gonna have his wife with him, because they murder her, or like bury her alive with him, and all his servants and everything. But that's really interesting. I mean, the ancient Egyptians are one of my favorite ancient cultures to study and look at. I love their culture and their history and their mythology. It's really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, one thing that definitely stands out is how they treated death and burial during that time. I think it is really unique and really cool. So think about it.
Yeah. And on the other end of the spectrum, when you aren't dying, what do people do to like spend their leisure time?
I gotta say, Gabe, sorry, real quick, your transitions are off the chain today. I gotta say. You are really killing these transitions. Alright, sorry, continue.
Alright, yeah. It's like, what do they do in their time off of, like, their job or their trade? What do they do in the time that they have to spend freely? Is there like a custom where, like, oh, everyone goes to watch like a performance at the theater, or perhaps everyone goes to sit around the bonfire in the middle of the small village and talk and dance, or perhaps it's just more like akin to our culture, where you have several different options of entertainment and things like that. It's just a fun little thing to think about, like when you're creating a culture. You want to think about like, okay, like, what do people do in like their everyday lives? Like, okay, they have their jobs. Obviously, I can think like, okay, this person that the characters might need is going to be like a merchant, but like to add it more to the character, like, what else do they do?
Their hobbies and stuff. Yeah, I think a great example is looking at Tolkien's Middle Earth. If you take the dwarves and the elves, the way they spend their leisure time, their forms of entertainment are much different, right? For an elf, they're like, oh, I got some free time. I'm going to go compose a song or write a book or study, the ancient mythology or do a painting. And then the dwarves are like, I'm going to go get drunk with my friends or I'm going to, go craft a piece of armor or something. It's much different based on the cultures of how they're spending their free time. What's entertaining to them. The elves, they're like, I'm going to take my nice salad meal and have a band come in, an orchestra really, and just play some nice music with some harps and flutes. And then the dwarves are like, I'm going to go to a tavern and, we're just going to have fun and sing songs and, all that kind of stuff. And then for a hobbit, it's like, I'm going to go outside and smoke. Or eat.
Or eat.
Yeah.
In addition to the other 11 meals.
11 C's.
But yeah, like, playing around with what people do in their off time gives each character in each culture so much more than just their job,
Yeah, for sure. And sorry, real quick. Just like if you're like running a tabletop RPG like D&D or whatever, this is a great way to immediately immerse your players into the the world. Say they come to a city or whatever, they enter a new region, and they enter a new settlement, with a new culture, a new group of people. Just describing, like, what the people are doing around them. As they walk through the city, what they see people are doing, and spending their time on, that can really help immerse your players into the world, and get them interested.
If you walk into a new culture and like, oh, this person's a merchant, that's like nothing new. Perhaps this is a merchant that, yodels loudly as he walks down the street to his whatever. I'm just like throwing things out there. I'm just saying that, jobs don't necessarily make things, unique or whatever. Just because this person is a merchant doesn't make them interesting, or just because this person is an inventor doesn't make them interesting. The way you can make these basic jobs more interesting is by deciding what they do in their off time. What else do they do?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Real quick, sports. I know we're all nerds here, so we don't really know how sports work, but if you do, sports are a cool thing to also put in a culture. And there's lots of interesting sports if you look at all the different cultures over the world, like that one Aztec one where they hit the ball with their hips through the hoop. I don't know. It's in the El Dorado movie. Okay, we gotta move on.
Yeah.
Art.
Speaking of things that add more color to a culture besides just their jobs. Art. That's it. That's the episode.
Guys, really? Art. If you think about it, art.
What about art?
What is the role of art in this culture? How does it work in society? Is art a big thing? Is being an artist a very, recognized and respected position? Is it a lowly position? Do you get paid a lot to be an artist?
If so, show me where that culture is.
Yeah. All that kind of stuff.
Like, how does an artist function in your world? Perhaps the artists in a small village or small tribe, they're revered for being able to create entertainment for the rest of the tribe, Or perhaps the artist is one small person who's living off meager wages as they sell their art in the big city. Or perhaps art is important for historical. Historical? Is that even a word?
No, historical. Historical. I think that's what you're looking for.
Important.
It's cool though. I like it. Historial.
Perhaps history is recorded in, the art, the songs that people make, the paintings.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, definitely. Or like maybe art is like really frowned upon, and it's like a big tribal warrior culture where nobody has time for art because you gotta bulk up and wrestle people and go get some weapons and just fight all the time and go hunting, and nobody cares about art. You ain't got time for that. Maybe that's
Nobody got
also a
time
part
for
of the
that.
culture. Is art is looked down upon.
Yeah.
So, you know, play around. All right. What else we got here on arts?
This could tie into like a history. Like, are there like celebrated artists in the past? You know, is there a Leonardo da Vinci? Is there?
Doja Cat.
Yeah, exactly. Mozart. You know.
Mick Jagger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Ariana Grande.
Justin Bieber.
See, guys, we're cultured. This is evidence that we are cultured and we're not just nerds. I know what 10 Rings is. I've heard it before. Okay. Sorry.
I prefer like the 9 Rings, Mortal Men.
You know, like the 10 rings that were given to the mortal men doomed to die. I'm just kidding. It's 9. I know. My nerd history. Come on.
Well,
But
actually,
yeah, but like
7
Shakespeare,
Rings, bro,
Van
what if the
Gogh.
7 Rings is just about the dwarves?
Oh. Yeah. Ariana Grande's song is actually about the ring cycle. It's like Ariana Grande's like an interview with Ariana Grande, and she's like, "Yeah, so I was listening to that long opera, and I was like really inspired to make a song, but instead of it being about dwarves who make rings, it's about how I'm rich." And you're like, "That's cool, Ariana Grande."
Bro, that's like no one's ever done that before. Wow.
The 10 rings cycle. Okay. Sorry. We're going on a tangent here. Yes, but having like certain celebrated artists or whatever in history or in the past can be cool. You know what? This reminds me of another thing. Just figures in your culture in general who are revered or respected or, you know, kind of put into legend. Maybe they're warriors, maybe they're leaders, or maybe they're artists if that's what your culture really favors. You know? Or maybe they were like, they're great pacifists, you know, world peace leaders or whatever it is.
World peace.
World peace. Okay, what else we got here?
How is art like affected by, outside influences from other regions, cultures, races, cities? Perhaps like just to figure like what like inspires art. Like perhaps you have this revered artist. Why are they revered? Perhaps that they, illustrated something that they was like shown by a god, or perhaps like they're important because they made this important song during a wartime that like recorded an instance, a battle, a fight, something like that. Or perhaps like and that like factors into like today's art or something like that, where people use their art to do similar things, like perhaps the people have done in the past. Or perhaps art is more influenced by mundane things. It's not necessarily used to record fantastic things that have happened. Perhaps art is just there to be able to celebrate the small things in life.
Yeah, I mean, I think we live in Hawaii, and I think that's a good example of like some different cultures kind of coming together and kind of creating, because there's the native Hawaiian culture, and then of course it became U.S. state, so then it was affected by American culture, and then also there's a ton of Japanese people here, so it was also affected by Japanese culture. So you'll find that in Hawaii, the culture has kind of evolved and been affected by outside influences, American culture, because obviously the most widespread language here is now English instead of ancient Hawaiian, and a lot of people watch anime because of Japanese influence and everything. But that's what the culture has become because of the effect of these outside influences.
And yeah, exactly how he is saying, like, the art that people consume here has been changed because of the outside influences that have brought that art here.
Yeah.
Also, some throws in there, like, is perhaps there's like a certain form of art or a certain subject of art that is like taboo or forbidden in your culture. You know, is there like, oh, you don't, you know, draw a picture of a god because that's like seems like sacrilegious or something.
Right. Right.
Just
Yeah.
like little things
Yeah.
to throw in
Also,
there. It's like taboo.
censorship.
Ooh, censorship.
Guys, censorship is the coolest thing. Wait, that sounds weird. I don't know how to word this. I really am interested in the history of like censorship and like art and stuff, and like how it's been censored and stuff by the government over time. Not just like in America, but just like all different kinds of cultures. And I love like those artists and stuff who would like slip like, you know, political views and stuff into like their story, like George Orwell and stuff like that, and like Shakespeare who would like slip like political, you know, commentary like into their art and plays and stuff because they would get censored or whatever from the leadership because of, you know, certain things. Yeah, that's really cool, and that's something that's really interesting. And also, like, even just taking that concept, you can build like a whole like side quest out of that.
Yeah.
You know, if you're running a RPG and they come into a new city or whatever, and you have a couple side quests they can go on in this new city, that's like a whole thing. Could be like, oh, the government is censoring this kind of thing, and yeah, so cool. And you can kind of play with one of the characters' like ideals or morals if they care about, you know, freedom of speech. If they're like a chaotic good character or whatever, you can kind of play to that. Anyway, yes, taboo arts. Cool. Don't paint a god.
What?
No, that was the example you gave. So I was just restating it. I mean, you can do whatever you want, listener.
You do you.
I assume Bahamut wouldn't really care. Okay. The Platinum Dragon would probably be flattered.
Next topic. Moving on from the rants. Fashion. Now,
Fashion, baby.
Shiloh and I really care about fashion a lot.
We're fashion icons.
Fashionistas, yes. I
Really?
wake up, I think about fashion, I go to sleep, and I dream about fashion. Right now, I'm wearing the most fashionable pair of gym shorts and insanely fashionable stressed tee from some brand. It definitely doesn't have holes
From
in
Ross.
No, I think I got this one from Goodwill.
Oh, snap. That's an aesthetic, though.
Yeah, it's like retro.
Yes, no, we're super fashionable. I, for one, I'm wearing a full 3-piece suit and a bowler hat right now. And a bow tie. Just kidding. I'm actually completely naked.
His fursuit, of course.
Yeah, fashion. We don't know a lot about fashion.
But perhaps the people in your culture do.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, we can. It's pretty obvious for, you know, just to be able to tell. Fashion can really help dictate. You can really tell, like, kind of get an idea of that culture just from the way that people dress.
Yeah, like perhaps like people in everyday like dress like really conservatively, and that like probably is a factor of something else in their culture that dictates how they should express themselves. Because that's what fashion is, really. It's trying to express yourself and express like your views and things like that. So people who are culturally more reserved probably dress more reserved as well, or people who culturally are stressed to be like more like out there, flamboyant and things like that. That is typically reflected in their attire.
Yeah.
And that's like so interesting. You know, you can tell so much about a culture just by how they dress. You know, you can make culture like so colorful and things like that with, you know, colorful coloring in their, what am I saying? Clothing.
I think I get what you're saying.
Designs, things like that, like Aztecs. You know, like color in their like art and their clothing and things like that. It's so interesting that like things like that can be a sign to other people, like, oh, this is what the culture is like just by how they look.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And if you want like kind of like big like market express, very colorful, like merchant culture, whatever. Then you make everyone wear big carpet cloaks with lots of different colors and patches and things. And their marketplaces have like all the spices from all around the world and stuff, and you know what I mean, like,
Yeah.
because they have all these colorful bits. And then if you're like, oh, this race is obviously evil, they all wear tattered black cloaks. No, but seriously though, yeah, I think fashion is really important. I just said trending because I was just about to say, what fashion is like trending? What's in, what's the new hip thing to be wearing, and then how does this kind of like trickle out through the region, right? Is there like an epicenter of fashion, like in a continent, like in a nation? Is there like a city or a region which is kind of like, everything that's happening? Yeah, the trendsetter, right. And then like how does that kind of trickle out to the rest of the region? Like how much later do the rest of the regions catch on to the fashion trends, or how do they kind of take those fashion trends but then also kind of put it into their own little subcultures that they've created?
Yeah.
This is
probably
getting
kind
of deep.
this, like before, because like, is there a place that is like that trendsetter in art, in fashion, in customs? Like perhaps, in a very reserved culture, like perhaps there's this one place that's starting to break away from that and try and set a trend of, changing customs.
Yeah, exactly. This is getting kind of deep. As we're talking through these world building episodes, we get pretty detailed. We're talking about some pretty detailed things here, and these are not all things you need to figure out like first time. Detail all these specific things about the fashion and all these different things about the customs and the sport and all that kind of stuff. But they are things to consider, and if you have the time and if you want to explore these things, you definitely should.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is there like a dress code? This is something that can be seen in our own history, in typical fantasy. Is like a dress code in a culture where, oh, you must dress this way, or you dress for your position, or you dress for your job. Is there a general dress code in your culture?
Mm-hmm.
Typical examples.
Yeah, like wearing suits.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, whatever. Or, if you work at home, wearing nothing, like us. But the cool thing is that now because of quarantine, everyone dresses the same now because we don't have to go anywhere. Okay. Architecture.
That means I'm not special.
Architecture is really interesting. I am not a big architecture nerd or anything, but I find it really, really interesting. Definitely my favorite is I know this is pretty common stuff, but I love old Gothic architecture, like Notre Dame, for older
Mm-hmm.
France and all that kind of stuff. I love architecture. I went to Europe last summer, and kind of Eastern Europe. We went through Hungary and Germany and stuff, and looking at all their older buildings, the different kind of architectural styles and stuff. So cool. I love it.
Yeah, and on the less fashionable side of architecture is what is the typical architecture of a typical home,
Right.
Is it something where it's, more run down? Perhaps the typical home is, part of a complex, or perhaps it's a standalone shack that people have in this widespread out region. Perhaps it's more of a tent. Perhaps people live, this way or that way. What is the typical architecture that people live in? And also, like we were saying, on the more upscale part, what is the beautiful architecture in that region? Is there a great cathedral? Is there a castle? Great big walls, grand.
Mm-hmm. And also, what is it made of?
Mm.
I think it's pretty important. If you look once again at Middle Earth, which is the epitome of fantasy worlds, the two kingdoms of men, right? Rohan and Gondor. Gondor, the main city of Gondor, Minas Tirith, is literally built out the side of a mountain. So everything's made of stone. Because they carved it out of the side of the mountain. I don't actually know if that's completely true what I just said, but the architecture is all stone work. And it's at least built onto the side of the mountain. I don't actually know if they carved it from a mountain. And then if you look at Rohan, who live in these big fields where there's like not a lot of topography changes, everything's made out of wood, because all they have access to is forests for lumber. They don't have access to mountains or stones or iron or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like how does the natural resource, like in the world, in that region, how does that factor into the architecture? What do they have at hand to be able to build with?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sorry I keep going back to Middle Earth, but it's just such a good example of so many things. If you look at, just like giving your architecture just kind of a general vibe as well, just like a little aesthetic, can go a long way. For example, at least in the films of The Lord of the Rings, like all the orc architecture, or like the dark architecture for all the villages, is very sharp and jagged. Tall towers with lots of jagged sides. The orc encampments are very rudimentary and just sharp. And then like the dwarves are very blocky and thick architecture. Lots of like looming pillars and large halls that are very, like smooth and block cut. And then the elves are very sweeping and curved lines and a much more softer kind of aesthetic to their architecture. I'm sorry, my siblings are screaming loudly in the background. They're having fun. They're playing. It's not like they're
Trust me,
hurting each other.
they're having fun. They're having fun.
Yeah, they're definitely not brawling. Those aren't screams of pain. Okay, let's get to the best part of art.
Food.
Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry.
And now we'll be taking a screen break.
All right, Gabe, food.
Food.
Let's talk about it. I love food.
I'm very hungry now. So, how do people in your culture make their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches?
Yeah. Butter side up, butter side down. Big question. Really define your culture.
I just have the most disgusting image. Imagine an inside-out peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Oh, what? Bro! No, it's like we take the bread and then we spread everything all around it. So you go through the peanut butter and jelly on the outside into the bread in the middle. That it literally defeats the purpose of a sandwich.
The reverse crustable.
No, but I mean maybe not that weird, and that's a very stupid idea. But that is the thing though. Their foods and how do they eat it? But also what goes into their foods? What do they have access to? What kind of meat do they have access to? People who live in the mountains versus people who live by a river gonna have access to different kinds of protein.
Yeah. And also the thing to keep in mind is how does the typical cuisine differ from people who are in the lower class to people who are more well off? Is it more seasoning, or perhaps they have access to more and better protein, or better fresh vegetables and things like that. And that also factors into, I know I'm ranting on going on, just the typical state of health in your culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that partially depends on what are they eating on a regular basis, what do they have to eat, and other factors like that.
Right. Yeah, this is getting, once again, a little deep.
Really niche,
but it is,
yeah.
it is something to definitely consider and to look at. Because when you put these kinds of things into your story, into your world, if you're playing an RPG game or whatever, people will notice that you've taken the time to be okay, so what kind of crops and stuff do they have access to, depending on the climate of where they live, what kind of plants can they kind of grow. You don't have to be super specific, but have some basic ideas.
Yeah, you don't need to make an entire storyline out of what type of grain, but perhaps when the characters are in this mountainous town and they go to the tavern, you can add as they sit down to get their food and stuff, they realize it is, this type of food that is available in the region. You know, it's just like a little thing they can add in there. As with a lot of these things we've talked about, to just add a bit more to the world.
Yeah. Super cool. And then we kind of already talked about this, but like, when is the meal times? How many meals do they have? Right? Hobbits have 7. You know, like, are there traditions that precede or follow a meal? Right?
Yeah.
In Christian culture, you pray. In Japanese culture, you go "Atatakimasu" before you eat. Or like, what's it called? Bon appetit. Whatever it is. Right? Are there customs or traditions that precede or follow a meal?
I thought you had to sing like, you know, the "Be My Guest" song every time before you.
Oh
ate,
no,
right?
no, yeah, no, that is
That's French
true.
culture, right?
Yes, in French you do have to sing "Be Our Guest" from Beauty and the Beast every time before you eat a meal. You have to split into 4-part harmony in the chorus, and you know you need a leading guy. Actually, French children, one of the first things they learn in school is like the alphabet, their numbers, their colors, their shapes, and that song. Everyone is raised on that song from the Disney movie made by Americans of France that actually has affected the entire culture. Okay.
And
Okay,
so to
now we're
close,
getting-
before we move on, perhaps like
Yeah,
your
go ahead.
perhaps like your food is really important to your culture. You know, it's part of like how they celebrate and what they, you know, look forward to in life. You know, perhaps like they're all about, you know, making this dish or making food, and it's a big part of, you know, who they are as a culture. Just in case you want to like make culture a bit different, you can use food to do that.
Yeah. There's all kind of things you can pull from, right? That's what these world building episodes are about. We want to give you inspiration, we want to give you ideas, things to think about. Because, you know, you're building a culture, you're building a nation or a race or whatever it is. There's so many things you can pull from. You know, a single aspect and just build the whole culture around it. Like Gabe just said, food is like cooking and being a chef, like the most revered position or whatever. Or you can pull from what we talked about earlier about like sports or about fashion or their celebrations or legendary figures in their history, right? You can take a single thing and build a whole culture around it. And that's what's so fun about world building. That's what's so cool.
Alright, we got more things to cover here. Next up, education. Does it suck? No.
Like here. Just kidding. Kind of.
Yes.
Not really. No, yeah, but like, does education exist? Are people learned? Can a lot of people read, or can like not a lot of people read?
Yeah, what's the general level of education? What's the system of education in your culture? Is it very structured, like ours? Is it more like, oh, you learn what people teach you, what people pass on to you? And education that can also factor into like how developed the world is, how developed the culture is. You know, a more developed culture, you know, where they have like technological advances, they probably have a better education system than a small rural tribe.
Right. Yeah. But this is actually like not a niche thing. This is actually a very important thing to figure out when it comes to your culture and your people or whatever. The level of education matters a lot. And really affects other things like art. You know what I mean? If you're in a place where people have very limited education, only the most high nobility or whatever ever learns how to read, then not a lot of people are going to be like reading books in their pastime or studying in their pastime or whatever because they can't read. And so that's, you know, that's very important.
And also factors into like their beliefs and things like that. Like, you know, people who can't read, perhaps they can't read, you know, their Bible and things like that, so they rely on other people to tell them about their beliefs, which is something you can pull from actual real history.
Right. Yeah. Catholicism and the whole thing of how all the Bibles used to be in Latin, so only the priests could read it and understand it, and the masses just came in and listened to Latin they couldn't understand for hours. And then, yeah, that that was a really good time. Okay.
Yeah, that made a lot of sense.
That made a lot of sense. And then there's a lot of, that's how a lot of corruption stuff came into the church. Anyway, but I mean that is a cool thing though to draw from, right? A thing in history that was really interesting that should inspire you.
Yeah, but don't try and do that again in our world, please.
Well, nowadays it's very easy to translate things. Thank God.
What if you create your own new language?
And a new religion.
And a new religion.
Which the holy text is only made in your new language. But here's my suggestion: don't if you're gonna do that, just make it in your fantasy world instead, because then it will actually mean something, rather than making it here in this world. Okay. What do we got next here?
Magic. Is magic taught in your world? Is it studied? Is that part of everyday education where people learn about magic, or perhaps it's only for people who have some sort of aptitude for magic, or it's for people who pay enough? How's magic taught, studied in your world? Does it exist? Are there schools for it?
Yeah. We're going to talk about magic in a whole episode.
Yeah.
At the end of this world building series. We're suspecting 2 world building episodes from now, so 2 months from now. However, our next episode we may have to split into 2 parts, depending on, at the rate we're going in this episode, that's probably going to have to be split into 2 parts. Okay. But real quick, what you did mention at the end about schools, like training magicians or whatever. Like in Skyrim, right? Isn't there a magic school?
Yes.
Yeah, so stuff like that.
Yeah. Also, other vocational schools, where people go to learn how to be carpenters, masons, things like that.
Right. Or is it like apprenticeships? Or whatever. Okay, and we talked about literacy rates, right? How does that affect communication and the distribution of information, right? Is it like a town crier, or is there like a newspaper?
That's a really good illustration, yeah.
Yeah. Do people gossip, they meet and they have to physically gossip, or they write each other letters?
So they can remotely gossip.
So they can remotely gossip, exactly. So they can gossip, but eloquently. Okay, final section here. Gender roles. Well, okay, we're not just talking about gender roles in this section here. We're just kind of talking about gender roles, but just family, all that kind of stuff. Also courtship and all that is kind of stuffed into this. We're just calling it gender roles, just kind of a blanket term for this topic. Yeah.
So, obviously, what are the gender roles in your culture? Are there gender roles in your culture? Is it expected that the man is to provide, or is it expected that both are to provide for the family, monetarily? Is it where perhaps you flip it on the typical perceived trend where the man is to provide the money and the woman is
as a home baker and stuff?
Yeah, perhaps you flip it on its head where perhaps in your culture women are the most revered in positions of power typically, and they provide for the family.
Right. Drow culture in D&D, in the Forgotten Realms. Gender roles, women are very much the heads of all the houses. They're the most powerful. They're the most revered. They're the only ones who can be priestesses. And the men are in turn considered lesser. Yeah, they just have different roles. They're military captains, and they can be wizards sometimes, but they can never become priestesses or whatever. Never become heads of houses in Drow culture. That's reserved for women. Or maybe the man is men are expected to become warriors, or women are expected to be educated, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Basic ground rules for how people in your culture function, and also how do they function as a family. We're already talking about this, but it's just how does a family function? Is there specific roles within a family? Is family something where you are one family with your extended family, where you live with all of your relatives and things like that?
Yeah.
And this is in a lot of cultures in our own world where people would stay with their close family and their extended family, and they consider themselves like one group there? Or is it perhaps like
Right.
more like in America where like you stay with your immediate family and then your extended family is like still part of your family, but they're like far away and not necessarily included in
Yeah.
everything.
Right. The family unit is just split up into
Yeah.
just an immediate family, right? Parents and their children. But in some cultures, it's like the aunties, the uncles, the grandma, the grandpas. They all live together. Yeah, I think that's important in the family unit. And yeah, just like how the family unit like just functions, right? Like you were saying, kind of just like the roles. Does the oldest child have this particular responsibility, or whatever? What is like the average like number of kids people have? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, other things like, oh, the oldest boy is the heir,
Right.
to the family fortune, to the family rulership, things like that. Or is it like competition between the children? A lot of different things you can throw in there in a family unit.
Right. Like that musical, 10 Ways to Get Away with Murder or something. That's super side tangent. Okay, anyway. It's a musical about a guy, though, who a very rich relative is going to die, or they did die, and then he has to, like, kill his family members to inherit the wealth. I think. I don't know a lot about it. I'm sorry. If you know what I'm talking about, maybe that was a good example for you. Okay.
Alright. What is considered a good parent?
Yeah.
Like, is something expected of parents in your culture? Like, oh, it is expected that the father passes on his trade to his son, Is it expected that the wife, teaches the kids, like, civil things and manners and things like that? It's what's expected of a family.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
okay, now we're getting on to the love part, the romance part of our podcast. Actually, I think we should. This is just super side tangent. I just thought of it though. I think we should do an episode sometime in the future about like romance. Like yes, in storytelling, and like the formula of romantic stories or whatever. But also like romance and tabletop RPGs. That's just such a weird topic. I don't know if we're super like qualified to like have a lot of expertise on it or whatever, because we don't have a lot of experience in our games or anything.
Yeah,
I don't really think a lot of people do, but like we can like give our opinions and stuff.
So we just like all make out at the end of every session. So there's no problem.
Yeah, but like our group is like all guys, so we've never had. I mean, we've barely had any romances in the game. We've had a couple people kind of get together with NPCs. We've never had any PCs to get together or anything, though. But like Critical Role,
yeah,
there's like romance in Critical Role, and some of the PCs get together, and some PCs get together with NPCs. I think actually, I don't know if that's true. But yeah, I feel like we should do an episode on romance. I think that'd be interesting. Anyway, romance in your world. In your world, though.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage, courtship, dating, romance.
Us together.
Today. What a great movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like
Okay,
how does like romance work in your world? Is it a strict courting system where all these rules and regulations are set in place? Is it more like, go and do whatever? There are rules for it. Is it where people don't see each other while they're courting? It's a lot of things you can throw in there. Right. How romance and relationships work in your world, and what happens, everything leading up to the marriage, how the marriage is, sanctified or regulated and things like that. And this all factors into like, how is the culture structured? Like, is it a very conservative? Is it a very totalitarian? Why am I saying legalistic
What's going on?
culture is the
Sure.
very, wild and free culture that factors into how romance.
Yeah, like Greece. Holy crap. They were crazy in ancient Greece. I gotta say.
I wonder what they would have been like if they discovered women exist.
No, but what Gabe was saying, like, is marriage a civil, like, governmental arrangement? Is it like under the blanket of religion? You know, does kind of like that culture's like main religion kind of oversee marriage, and that's like it's a religious institution, or like is it a legal thing? Those are all things to think about. And what he was saying about arranged marriages, right? Do people marry for love? If not, why do they marry? Do they marry for money, or whatever? Or do people even get married?
Sure.
Or do people have like just multiple partners throughout their life, or whatever? Yeah. Just all those kinds of questions. And that affects a lot like the family unit that we were talking about.
You Leia, my love.
Right.
Sorry.
What? Or like, are they polygamous relationships, right? That's what it's called? Yeah, polygamous, monogamous, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and also in a lesser extent, like, what you were saying, like, how do they view, sex, how taboo is all that kind of stuff. Is it like Greece, just, do whatever the heck you want, or is it more a little, like, taboo or restricted, like adultery and all that kind of stuff is, like, frowned down upon, or is that commonplace, or all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all that fun, great stuff.
All that fun stuff. Okay, that brings us to kind of the end of what we kind of want to talk about in this episode, but there's a thing that we close every world-building episode with because it's very important. Gabe, what is that?
Number one world-building question. If I make a change to the world, you always want to ask yourself this. How does this affect the other aspects of the world? Dun-dun-dun-dun.
It's true, though.
Yeah. Basically, whenever making a change, you want to figure out how does this affect the other things that I've set in place in the world. Is there like a waterfall effect? This leads to this, leads to this, and it's all falling over. You want to figure out how things fit together in the puzzle of your world.
Right, because you want to at least make your world a consistent, place. That makes sense.
Yes.
Right? If there's a place, where, like, horses don't exist in your world, but for some reason, people, like, travel really quickly to places and they don't have any sort of, like, you have to figure out, how do people travel now? How do certain things work because you don't have horses?
Yeah,
you can't just have
it as colorful as you want, but if it isn't, legible to the players, if it isn't like believable and understandable, then you're kind of missing the mark.
Yeah, because that's like the number one thing people pick that out immediately. Just like how like when you're watching a movie, like the only thing you can think about is plot holes. The moment they come up. It's the same thing. Like, you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. That's not consistent with their world. Immediately takes people out. Right? Breaks the immersion. So that's just something to think about. Alright, any final thoughts before we go to closing?
Please forgive us for our rants, and...
No, that's what they're here for.
If you are still here, thank you.
Thanks. Let's go to closing. Okay, you guys. Thank you so much for listening. That's the end of this episode. Good old world building episode. Nice to be back in our world building series.
Back in business, baby.
Back in business.
Yep.
All right, real quick plugs. Once again, recap.
So at D20 _ Academy on Instagram. Message us there if you want to get into our Discord. We also now have a YouTube channel under the same name where we are slowly uploading our past episodes there. If that is your preferred form of entertainment, that you can search us up on YouTube, find our episodes there. Alright, I think that's good in closing. Next episode is going to be a class spotlight on the Warlock. Warlock is Shiloh's favorite class mechanically. He loves it so much.
I love the mechanics of this class. I love how it works. I love how spellcasting works. I love invocations. I love everything about it. Just kidding. If you want to hear my actual thoughts, come back next week. We're going to be breaking form a little bit and doing a world building and a class spotlight episode right after one after another. But that's because we got a two-parter that we want to fit in next month. That's going to be really exciting, and you'll hear more about that next week.
All right. Till then, play Mystic.
Shoots. What did you just say?
Play Mystic.
No, don't play a Mystic. Please. Or maybe. Depends on how much you like your GM. Okay, bye.